Verses 22 to 24. One of the disciples expresses his wonder and surprise at it. v. 22. Observe. Who it was that said this? Judas, not Iscariot. Judah, or Judas, was a famous name. The most famous tribe in Israel was that of Judah. Two of Christ's disciples were of that name. One of them was the traitor, the other was the brother of James. Lu 6:16. One of those that were akin to Christ. Mt 13:55. He is called Lebus, and Thaddeus was the penman of the last of the epistles, which in our translation, for distinction's sake, we call the Epistle of Jude. This was he that spoke here. Observe, first, there was a very good man, and a very bad man, called by the same name, for names commend us not to God, nor do they make men worse. Judas the apostle was never the worse, nor Judas the apostate ever the better, for being namesakes. But, secondly, the evangelist carefully distinguishes between them. When he speaks of this pious Judas, he adds, not Iscariot. Take heed of mistaking, let us not confound the precious and the vile. What he said, Lord, how is it? Which intimates either, first, the weakness of his understanding. So some take it. He expected the temporal kingdom of the Messiah, that it should appear in external pomp and power, such as all the world would wonder after. How, then, thinks he, should it be confined to us only? Ti Gaganan, what is the matter now, that thou wilt not show thyself openly as is expected, that the Gentiles may come to thy light, and kings to the brightness of thy rising? Note, we create difficulties to ourselves by mistaking the nature of Christ's kingdom, as if it were of this world. Or, secondly, as expressing the strength of his affections, and the humble and thankful sense he had of Christ's distinguishing favors to them. Lord, how is it? He is amazed at the condescensions of divine grace, as David, 2 Sa. 7:18. What is there in us to deserve so great a favor? Note, 1. Christ's manifesting himself to his disciples is done in a distinguishing way to them, and not to the world that sits in darkness, to the base, and not to the mighty and noble, to babes, and not to the wise and prudent. Distinguishing favors are very obliging, considering who are passed by, and who are pitched upon. 2. It is justly marvelous in our eyes, for it is unaccountable, and must be resolved into free and sovereign grace. Even so, Father, because it seemed good unto thee. Christ, in answer hereto, explains and confirms what he had said, v. 23:24. He overlooks what infirmity there was in what Judas spoke, and goes on with his comforts. He further explains the condition of the promise, which was loving him, and keeping his commandments. And, as to this, he shows what an inseparable connection there is between love and obedience. Love is the root, obedience is the fruit. First, where a sincere love to Christ is in the heart, there will be obedience. If a man love me indeed, that love will be such a commanding constraining principle in him, that, no question, he will keep my words. Where there is true love to Christ, there is a value for his favor, a veneration for his authority, and an entire surrender of the whole man to his direction and government. Where love is, duty follows of course, is easy and natural, and flows from a principle of gratitude. Secondly, on the other hand, where there is no true love to Christ, there will be no care to obey him. He that loveth me not keepeth not my sayings, v. 24. This comes in here as a discovery of those that do not love Christ, whatever they pretend. Certainly those do not love him that believe not his truths, and obey not his laws, to whom Christ's sayings are but as idle tales, which he heeds not, or hard sayings, which he likes not. It is also a reason why Christ will not manifest himself to the world that doth not love him, because they put this affront upon him, not to keep his sayings. Why should Christ be familiar with those that will be strange to him? He further explains the promise, v. 23. If a man thus love me, I will manifest myself to him. First, my Father will love him. This he had said before, v. 21, and here repeats it for the confirming of our faith, because it is hard to imagine that the great God should make those the objects of his love that had made themselves vessels of his wrath. Jude wondered that Christ should manifest himself to them, but this answers it: if my Father love you, why should not I be free with you? Secondly, we will come unto him, and make our abode with him. This explains the meaning of Christ's manifesting himself to him, and magnifies the favor. 1. Not only I will, but we will, I and the Father, who, in this, are one. CV 9. The light and love of God are communicated to man in the light and love of the Redeemer, so that wherever Christ is formed the image of God is stamped. 2. Not only, I will show myself to him at a distance, but, we will come to him, to be near him, to be with him. Such are the powerful influences of divine graces and comforts upon the souls of those that love Christ in sincerity. 3. Not only, I will give him a transient view of me, or make him a short and running visit, but, we will take up our abode with him, which denotes complacency in him and constancy to him. God will not only love obedient believers, but he will take a pleasure in loving them, will rest in love to them. Zeb 3:17. He will be with them as at his home. He gives a good reason both to bind us to observe the condition and encourage us to depend upon the promise. The word which you hear is not mine, but his that sent me. V 24. To this purport he had often spoken, ch 7:16, 8:28, 12:44, and here it comes in very pertinently. First, the stress of duty is laid upon the precept of Christ as our rule, and justly, for that word of Christ which we are to keep is the Father's word, and his will the Father's will. Secondly, the stress of our comfort is laid upon the promise of Christ. But forasmuch as, in dependence upon that promise, we must deny ourselves, and take up our cross, and quit all, it concerns us to inquire whether the security be sufficient for us to venture our all upon, and this satisfies us that it is, that the promise is not Christ's bare word, but the Father's which sent him, which therefore we may rely upon.